Just so I don't forget. All right, we have 1 minute.
Oh, I see it. Welcome to Great Marblehead Newspaper War.
Yeah.
Oh, was that how it was listed? I didn't see. Oh, all right.
Nice headline.
I didn't recall that part.
Yeah.
All right, so we are almost there, and then we'll begin with a roll call. Well, we'll call the meeting to order and then a roll call.
Yes. What is today? January 4th, special meeting.
Right. Okay, I have 7 o'clock, so we're going to begin the January 4th, 2023 special meeting of the Marblehead Planning Board to discuss the issue of ADUs in preparation of bringing it to our final public meeting and then ultimately to hopefully to town meeting and hopefully a vote. So the meeting is hereby opened and we'll begin with a roll call vote. I'm sorry, attendance roll call. So I'll begin Rosanna.
Here.
Ed,
Here.
Andrew,
Present.
Barton,
Present.
Steve.
Present.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, everybody. So the purpose of the meeting is to review what we call the penultimate draft, I suppose, of the language of the amendment to the zoning bylaws in support of the idea of accessory dwelling units. So let's tee it off. Becky has put it on the screen.
Yep. So this is the latest draft, and I started to put it into shape for an actual article to see if the town will vote to amend the zoning bylaw and the article and then the number. I sent it to council. I was going to wait, but then just to make sure I have the rubrics correct, and so we'll get that back, and I'll send you any comments that they may have.
Okay, when do you expect that?
Well, I told her when our meeting was, and she knows when the warrant closes, so probably
Okay.
tomorrow.
Okay,
But that's not on substantive things.
Okay.
She already commented on that.
Okay,
This
so
is
more
just-
language.
Yeah, just whether we
grammar.
should have it 250 or if we should have it 245 and change the rubrics. It's that kind of thing, not
Yeah.
anything substantive.
Okay, and then just to remind everybody the date of the public meeting.
So that is our next regularly scheduled meeting, which is Tuesday.
Right, next Tuesday.
Yep.
Right. Okay, that's the
10th.
10th.
7:30, and we have an A&R, but other than that, that's all we have on the agenda.
Okay, good. All righty. So if we walk through it, I imagine you all are very familiar with it thus far, but I guess we can walk through item by item if you'd like. All right.
Yeah.
So the purpose, right, this section is authorizing the provision of accessory dwelling units is intended to increase the number of small dwelling rental units available in the town, increase the range of choice of housing accommodations to meet the needs of households, to increase the supply of housing and the diversity of housing options in response to demographic changes, such as smaller households and older households, to encourage the efficient use of the town's housing supply while preserving the character of the town's neighborhoods, and to maximize privacy, dignity, and independent living among family members, preserving domestic family bonds, as well as to protect the stability, property values, and the residential character of the neighborhood. Does anyone have any thoughts or comments on that initial?
The only thought that I had, and I don't know, so this already happens today, right? Like people can be doing this now and it's unregulated.
No.
It's not.
Well, they can do it illegally.
Yeah,
They
it's
can-
not,
right.
yeah, it's not
They can do-
allowed, but we understand it may be occurring in practice illegally.
So do you think there's any benefit in the purpose of this to, and I can't think of the words exactly, but to somehow, I don't want to say regulate, but it is kind of putting in place a framework for something that's already happening. Like it's not new per se.
Mm.
I don't know if
Right,
that makes
well,
sense.
So there is, and other communities have found this, that the illegal ones can, they're not always safe. They don't always have the right things because they're not legal, and they can come in under this, and it makes safer dwelling units kind of thing.
We
But I don't
put
know if we want,
something-
I don't know if we want to put that as a purpose, but I guess that is something that other communities have said has happened.
We had that language at one, was that language somewhere, or was that
We
just in a
we talked
discussion?
about it. We talked about it, and I think we presented that was one of the things that it can bring in,
It's sort of like, Rosanna,
bring things
it
into
seems-
compliance.
it seems to me it's less a purpose than a side a benefit. And you know what I mean? Like what it does ultimately is it makes safer a condition that might be happening behind the scenes. It's hard to,
Yeah,
you
no, I
could-
agree with you. Like I do, yeah, it's hard because I'm thinking that for people, again, I'm just trying to put myself in the shoes of someone seeing this for the first time, like not having the benefit of having been involved, just wondering, like, I don't know. It was just a thought, just in terms of the
Yeah,
framework as to why this is happening. Like, it's not, it's to increase the number of small dwelling units, but it's also to almost codify something that is happening, but we don't want to necessarily draw attention to that.
yeah,
But
exactly.
don't know.
It's hard to
It's
do
just-
that,
just a
especially we
thought.
don't have a lot of facts on that. So I think this is, people will be very relieved if they're in those conditions. I imagine that they can be, legal.
Yeah.
And then,
Okay.
but otherwise, but thank you. Under item 2, general requirements, it begins with no more than one ADU shall be permitted for each principal dwelling unit. The second is that at least one owner of the residence in which the accessory dwelling unit is created shall reside in one of the dwelling units, either the principal or accessory unit created therein, as a principal place of residence. For the purpose of this section, the owner shall be one or more individuals who hold title to the property or a purchase and sales agreement, and for whom the dwelling unit shall be the primary residence as evidenced by voter registration, tax return, or other documentation demonstrating primary residence. Owner occupancy is required for an accessory dwelling unit to be permitted. And then I think we have a typo. It should be C, I guess, the next item, right? I think.
Yep.
And then this would be the accessory dwelling unit may not be sold or transferred separate and apart from the principal dwelling to which it is an accessory use. The principal dwelling and the accessory dwelling unit shall remain in common or single ownership and shall not be severed in ownership. Short-term rentals are prohibited in both the accessory unit and principal dwelling units. Does anyone have questions on item 2? Good. Item 3 is the exterior appearance and size. The accessory apartment. Did we change
Unit.
terminology?
No,
Okay.
we should say unit.
Okay. The accessory dwelling unit shall be designed to maintain the appearance and essential character of a one-family dwelling with accessory structures, subject further to the following conditions and requirements. A, where 2 or more entrances exist on the front facade of a dwelling, one entrance shall appear to be the principal entrance and the other entrance appear to be secondary. B, all stairways to the ADU above the first floor shall be located on the rear or side of the dwelling. C, the accessory dwelling unit shall not contain in excess of 900 square feet of habitable space or exceed 50% of the gross floor area of the principal dwelling.
Should that be and or
Oh, good one.
exceed? I
Yeah,
think so.
right. Right.
And
Thank
or
you.
assume.
Thank you. D, the accessory dwelling unit shall not contain more than 2 bedrooms And E, the accessory dwelling unit shall be clearly subordinate in use, size, and design to the principal dwelling.
That might be redundant, but
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
To clarify, are we saying on item C that the accessory dwelling unit shall not contain in excess of 900 square feet or not exceed 50% of the gross floor area? So if a building is 2,000 square feet, the accessory unit could be 1,000 square feet.
Yeah,
no, I
I-
think we're saying in excess of 900 and
Yeah.
then,
we were trying to limit it no matter how
right,
big.
because
the
if you had
primary-
a 5,000 square foot house, you
Right.
could, yeah, we still want to limit it to,
Yeah, Ed,
So
I
it's-
wouldn't want to see in a 5,000 square foot house, a 2,500 square foot ADU.
and there's a lot of 5,000 square foot houses.
Okay.
So I was at least this meant a lot to me to keep them limited to 900.
So, Chair, what's the rationale for limiting to 900 square feet? What were you suggesting?
Well, it's just like in terms of what it's intended to be, a modest unit, that I think it get out of hand in a hurry. In terms of character, I'm just nervous about it getting bigger.
Yeah, it's pretty common in most of the communities that they do have some sort of limit, either 900 or 1,000 square feet, so that it, remains smaller. And so then it's naturally occurring affordable housing rather than putting a limit on we talked about doing 70% and all those sorts of things, but it makes it smaller. It has to be.
I mean, do you think it should be, Andrew? Are you thinking that maybe that's a little too small?
No, I just was looking for the rationale.
I think it is too small. I think if you were to try to dimension a small ranch house, a first floor with a second story gable roof, I think it would come out to more than 900 square feet.
So a unit in a ranch house, or
If you were to add a small, some there are a lot of modest ranch houses around town, and many of them are, they're over 900 square feet, though. I think the gross area is probably more like, 1,400 or something like that.
but you're adding a unit to that.
Yeah, I'm trying to find out what you're saying, Ed.
Yeah, so if you have 1,400 square feet, you certainly wouldn't want to put a unit in that's 1,200, because then you'd
Well,
only have,
No, what I'm saying is that the accessory unit would be, could be up to 1,400 square feet if the ADU had a second level.
Oh,
If you-
boy,
if you-
but
Yeah.
yeah,
We're not saying they should all be one-story buildings. If you want to make a two-story,
well, it's an existing building and you're putting one in.
Would potentially removing the square footage designation and just making it no more than 50% of the size of the primary residence?
no, because then on a 5,000, there's a lot of really big houses in this town. That means you're going to enormous ADUs.
So just to be devil's advocate, and so why are we concerned about that? Like, what is wrong with having a 2,000 square foot?
Because you're trying to have smaller,
Yeah,
a more affordable. So by virtue of their size, they become more affordable. This whole thing came out of the housing production plan.
yeah, it
That's
changes the
where-
whole tone of things. Like,
Well-
we've been like, this is kind of a item that we've had in here for a long time now. I'm surprised that, I could see if it was an issue of is 900 versus 1,000, but this is a pretty big thing to be reconsidering now. But I guess we can.
No, I think it's, I think it's better that we are very critical right now because people are gonna have the same questions, right? So best that we have the answer. when people
Yeah.
If somebody thought maybe 1,000 was better, I'm cool with that, but I'm not.
Yeah,
I think
some
we
communities
absolutely-
do have 1,000, but.
I think
um,
more is our role. We have to protect the character of the community. We can modify this over time, perhaps, but I think it's important for us to get a start. And I
Well,
think it's a lot
but-
safer to get a start with limits that don't
Yeah,
freak
I think
people
it's
out.
a reasonable question someone might ask, why 900? So, no, it's fine. I don't care, 900, 1,000, to me, it's immaterial, but.
Those are good size
Yeah.
units, 900 or 1,000 feet.
Yeah,
Those
but-
aren't small.
well,
I
it's
think
30,
it's
it's
imagine.
30, 30 by 30 by on one story. But again, if you go back to if you went to a second story what would be the size of the footprint? And then what would be the, living, dining, kitchen on the first floor and then 2 bedrooms on the second floor? What would be the gross area of a house that small?
Right, 30 by 30 is a very big footprint. If you were to
Monster,
put it
yeah.
in the backyard as an accessory building. That's
Can I,
big.
can I say a couple things?
Good.
I mean, this,
Yeah.
so aside from the affordable housing aspect, I look at this as the in-law caregiver. This is what I think is really important, especially as an elder law attorney in seeing this.
Yeah.
What if 2 grandkids or 2 children come to stay with mom? Is 900 square feet enough for 2 people?
Yeah,
That's a lot. There are apartments in New York that are 400 square feet and 3-4 people live in them.
For work, this isn't New York.
I guess.
Well,
What I'm saying is it's not tiny.
yeah,
yeah, and the
feet's-
Board of Health says you need 150 per person, right?
yeah. And Andrew, I think that, generally you have to assume that if it's a direct family member coming to visit, of course, you would think there's more room within the house itself. This is for a long-term kind of solution for either the elderly person to move into this and rent their house out, as long as it's big enough for that, for a single or a couple to live in, seem to cover the most needs. And again, I'm open if 1,000 sounds better, but once you start getting over that, I think we're not, what we have to do is protect the town from, to me, it's a big thing about character of this town, light and air and space, and everything else. And I just want to be conservative to start with if we can.
Yeah, Bob, I'm with you. I think if you look at all of those items A through E collectively in the context, they all kind of work together to establish some kind of baseline that then, can be modified over time. But I think it's important to start with some, clearly understandable starting point, because people are going to be spending money and making investments in architects and everything. So I think it's incumbent on us
Right.
to give them some guidance as to what this, what the intent is here.
Right. And if
If
the
you-
town is fearful of overdoing it, I don't want to be supporting something that, would scare people off.
Well, how about 1,200 feet? Because if you were to design, if you took a 2-car garage, 24 by 24, that's about 625 square feet on one level. And if you had a 2-story house,
It's habitable space, Ed.
if
Is
if
the-
you were to make it, 2 bedrooms upstairs and a living, dining, kitchen downstairs, and not leaving much room for storage, that would be about 1,000 to 1,200 square feet, and even that would be tight.
I
You know,
changed it to.
I think we're losing sight of it.
yeah, I'm not supportive of that, Ed, right
I
now.
think the real issue here is we started off with one thing and now it's morphed into something else. The real
Yeah.
issue is we started off and the Housing Production Committee came out with the tremendous need was for the aging population. Kids,
But also, it said naturally occurring affordable housing.
I didn't
was-
get to that. You're correct.
Right.
And affordable housing. I mean, I've been waiting to say something, but there's nothing in this document that refers to aged people, affordability, restriction on cost for affordability. This is, I made a note,
Well,
it's
can-
written as, this is unrestricted as written here.
we haven't
Doesn't
gone through it
mention
yet, Bart. Can we,
I read the
Can
whole
we-
document. It doesn't, well, hold on, before we get too far. It does not mention anything relating to affordability, aging parents or children moving home. Now, having said that, that's what the whole design was supposed to be. It wasn't supposed to
Right.
be to make a 2-family house out of it. The more you increase
it's
square footage, the more you increase it to make it a 2-family house. That's
No,
not.
it's not a 2-family. Yeah. It's different from a 2-family.
Correct. And if we increase it, that becomes, the spirit becomes a 2-family house. The more you increase it, the bigger the area,
yeah,
the more it becomes.
I agree with that.
I mean, I'm not saying make it a cracker box of 300 feet. That's up to somebody, but, I think
Yeah.
900, 1,000 feet is certainly ample for
Yeah.
what this was meant to do.
I agree with that.
Okay, Sorry, I froze there for a minute. I don't know what happened. I have to find.
I think one rationale was to make it as general and as wide open as possible so that it wouldn't just sit there on the books and very little achievement, but if it had broad parameters, it would actually be of interest to more people. And there might be some more, better results that way. So not
But-
pushing a bigger house for a bigger house, but just, I want it to be practical. So it appeals to, people and contractors. And actually the cost per square foot gets higher when you build a small house. If you make it a little bit bigger, it's going to be a little bit more economical per square foot.
Yeah, Ed, my problem with that is just that, again, we're trying to pass something that could have opponents, right? And I just want to be careful and not overdo it, the first bite of the apple. Plus, as we look at other towns, the biggest, I think, I'm not sure I saw one. Did we see one above 1,000?
I
There
don't
was like,
think
there was
so, but I
750,
can
there was
look.
800, there was 900, and maybe 1,000. So I'm just like, I'm not supportive. We can hear where the rest of the board members are. And again, this is going to go to town meeting and, be presented to the public, and we can mention, we're going to pose it next week. But
Well,
You know.
I think you may have people who, like, to your point, right? We have to manage this, start slow, let's get something out there, let's
Right.
go from there. But you're gonna have people in the other camp too that are like, wow, this feels restrictive. This feels very like, what if I want to do 2,000? So I don't know that everyone's gonna fall into the conservative camp. I think you're also gonna have people who feel like this is my property. Why can't I do a little bit more with, like, why do I have to stick to this? So, we're not gonna be able to guess.
but again, we're
every-
not trying to
yeah,
change the zoning to 2-family.
Right.
Let's be
right.
really careful here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the spirit of this was for one thing. We're losing sight of that.
Exactly.
And as far as, I'll give you, which I didn't have time to get out the last time. Here's the problem. If we leave this unrestricted and we say, okay, you can build an accessory dwelling use for income enhancement, you build at 1,200 feet, 1,000 feet, no cap on what you can charge. You're going to get young people that do well. They're going to take up the whole housing. That's what's going to happen. And I will bet the farm on that. It's not going to go for affordability. That will go out the window because it's going to go to true market value. Nobody will be able to afford it. It's going to be gobbled up by people, young people that can afford it, that want to move out of the city because there is a shortage of apartments in Marblehead. Everybody wants to move here. If we have a restriction, then it will achieve everything we want. We'll get people the affordability aspect. Maybe we won't have a bazillion people building it. If we start off and 5 people build it the first year, that's 5 people.
That's a success.
Yeah, that actually got to enjoy with the affordability problem
Right.
issue. If we can get elderly people, that's the main target.
To stay in their homes. Right. Yeah.
Correct. But
Yeah.
if
So
we
I
leave
don't
it
want to, sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry, if we leave it unrestricted and we let people, they can build 2,000 feet, then it becomes a 2-family home. They use it as a revenue stream. And then we've opened up Pandora's box and there goes Marblehead. That's
Yeah.
what my feeling is. And I think I've voiced my opinion on that since day one. I'm not against this, but I'm against unrestricted to let anybody
Right.
do what they want.
Andrew, you were trying to say something?
Yeah,
too?
yeah, Bob, there's a member of the public that has their hand raised. I don't know
Okay, I didn't-
protocol on how you want to entertain.
Well, frankly, I kind of wanted, this is not the
Get
open
through
public
it.
meeing yet. I'd like to get through the whole thing. And then if the public can hold their questions until the end, we'll recognize that. So, in the,
Actually, Mrs. Schaffner, as a taxpayer in this town, I can understand what the zoning board is trying to do.
You
I
want to
think
do
it's rife with problems. 5 years I've been messing with conservation in the town. I finally got a building permit after 5 years because I abut conservation property, wetlands, 5 years to put a 2-car garage up on my property. And now you're telling me after all that effort and expense that evidently I know it's not done yet because it has to go to town meeting. That
Well,
all of a sudden,
sir, first of
I
all,
can
there,
put no, listen to me, please. And then I'll stop talking and we can finish this and go back to public comment. The gist on the street is what you people are trying to do as the zoning board is allow people to double and zero lot line, whatever the heck it is, to put up these accessory dwelling units. And my last house on Kenneth Road, I was told my 15 square foot storage shed was illegal and I had to take it down.
Sir, there are two things I want to just comment on. One is, so what this is, we've had public meetings along the way, the whole process,
I
right?
know we have.
And we will have another
I've-
one
I
next
have
week,
followed.
next Tuesday, we'll have another one. This is a working meeting. We have a lot to do. We're intended to get through this as the planning board. We will open it up at the end, time permitting, for public
Okay.
comment.
Hey,
Second part is just for a little information. If you listen to where we go here and watch, every single structure has to live within the boundaries of the zoning requirements of the lot. Nothing can happen. And in fact, if anything needs a special permit, it has to go through. So we'll get into that later, but we're very careful about that.
Okay, so where
Okay,
were we?
so we'll continue the, okay, so where did we leave off?
Oh,
So
so 900 or 1,000.
we can
um,
take I would say right now, let's hear people's opinions on which of those two numbers, people want to go with, but I'm hesitant to broaden it past 1,000. So
Well,
Yeah.
tomorrow
please-
I'm happy to put together a matrix. It's really simple of, what other towns do, just so we know, and I'll send it out to you guys if you
I-
want to think
I
about
might
it.
have that, but I don't have it handy. So
I found Barton's comments convincing, and you can always loosen the restrictions, but you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube once it's out.
exactly,
So
exactly.
I mean, if you're stuck between 900 and 1,000, make it 950. I mean, seriously.
What's the difference?
Does anyone have an opinion on the size? Like, just if you,
Either
regardless of-
side, I don't have a.
A thousand, I would favor 1,000.
All right.
okay, you want to
So
go,
we-
all right? Does anyone have an opposition to 1,000 that's on the board? Okay, all right, Becky, we'll make that, and again, of course, it'll go for public comment next week.
Yep.
Okay. The
Now
next
let's see.
item was, item 4 was procedure, I believe, right?
Yep,
Okay, let's see, let me just enlarge this here. Okay. If an ADU is proposed within an existing single-family structure or detached accessory building that meets all the dimensional regulations of Table 2 of the zoning bylaw and has one additional parking space, then they may construct by a building permit. A special permit from the planning board is needed if an ADU is proposed for the following. Why don't I change that to a colon instead of a semicolon?
Yeah.
First, within an existing family structure or detached accessory building that is not in compliance with all of the dimensional regulations of Table 2 of the zoning bylaw and does not have one additional parking space. The second is an addition to an existing single-family structure or detached accessory building unit that is not in compliance with all the dimensional regulations of Table 2 of the zoning bylaw and does not have, oh wait.
one is
Same-
within an existing structure or detached, and the other is an addition to.
Oh, I see, but
See,
why?
The difference is, so let's
Yeah,
say you
right,
have,
right.
let's say you have a house that
But-
is not conforming to zoning, so
But don't
it's,
we also need a new detached structure? That
yeah,
doesn't-
that's here. And, oh, I see. An
Yeah, an addition or,
to- Or new,
right, or new
Yeah.
detached, right.
Yeah.
Right, okay, got it. So this hopefully addresses that gentleman's concerns that, that nothing happens that's not already within the acceptable limits of the bylaw. C then is a completed application for ADU must be submitted to the building commissioner together with a floor plan showing the proposed interior and exterior changes. Actually, it's more than a floor plan then. I guess it would be plans showing the proposed interior and exterior changes to the building. And the owners must submit a notarized letter stating that the owner will occupy one of the dwelling units on the premises as the owner's primary residence.
and I think on the application, there'll be a thing that's certifying that you're not renting it out for as a Airbnb and that sort of.
Actually, I'm wondering,
will be
Becky, if we
included.
need to change that to, instead of a plans, like if we say with drawings showing, and whether we have to be explicit then to show what kind of drawings, I don't know.
Yeah, I think so. I think I probably have to work on that a little bit and
Right,
then you'll see.
okay.
And I think also, you need a plot plan no matter what.
Oh, good point. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay, so that's C, and I can't remember, was there a D on this one?
Yes,
Down below.
Okay,
we'll work on that. So if applying,
right.
D.
If applying for a special permit, in addition to a completed application and floor plans showing the proposed interior and exterior changes and notarized letter, the following must also be submitted. I'm trying to, so
Site plan and building elevations. So,
it seems to me that says, in addition to completed application and floor plans. So,
you also, I was thinking you need site plan and building elevations, but you may need that for any of them.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so let me
Okay.
change this so that it's all,
All right,
and we may have additional things.
Okay.
But anyway, I can work on that.
standards for special permit for ADUs.
So
One,
I took this
okay.
from the bylaw. Many of
Yep.
our planning board special permits, this is sort of the thing. So I kind of
That's helpful.
retrofitted
This
it.
is helpful, right? That architectural features and design are compatible with the existing neighborhood. Vehicular is safe and convenient. Parking is provided or adequate in neighborhood. Now, what does that mean? That part, parking is provided or adequate in neighborhood? Because don't we
So-
have a parking requirement?
So yes, but if they're coming to the planning board, they may be coming, don't have parking. That's one of the zoning
I see.
deficiencies.
I see,
So
okay.
they
got
don't
it.
have a space. So
I see,
let's say they're in a neighborhood where plenty of on-street
I
parking, no
see.
issue.
I see, okay,
That's one thing, or, their driveway is,
okay,
able to tandemly have a building, or they say, my mother and father are 90 and 95 and they
and
don't
they don't
have.
drive, right? All right, then adverse effects on abutters are minimized, limited or no impact from the street and privacy. In order to encourage the development of housing units for disabled and handicapped individuals and persons with limited mobility, the SPGA may allow reasonable deviation from the stated conditions where necessary to install features that facilitate access and mobility.
So
I don't know if
like
you
a ramp or
Yeah.
elevator kind of thing that would, normally you would say, well, that's kind of an impact from the street, but in order
Right.
to, make it ADA compliant.
And the word be, instead of deviation, would you say relief or waiver or is deviation the right word you want to put there?
Interesting. Maybe relief, right?
Well, yeah, relief, I would say.
Yeah, that sounds better.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then finally, the planning board may impose any conditions deemed necessary to achieve the purpose of this bylaw.
We typically say that at the end of
Right.
all of our, standards.
Wasn't item 4 the prior? Can we go up a second in terms of the numbering?
Yes, this is 5.
Okay,
I've switched them around a bunch of
I see.
times
Okay.
just to see what made sense.
So item 5, conditions and requirements.
Wait a minute, I have a
Think-
question of procedure.
Sure. Yeah.
If I'm reading A, does that mean somebody can do this by right?
Somebody can do,
Procedure, A, if an
Yeah.
ADU is proposed with an existing, that means
Yeah.
they can do it by right?
Right.
so if it's inside a house and there's no addition and the house meets all the zoning
Mhm.
and they have one additional parking space, yes.
Well, it
Right.
says structure or detached accessory building. So they could have a big shed and make it an ADU by
As
right?
long
Right.
as they're not changing the
Right.
exterior, so it's just inside of it.
Right,
And it meets zoning, so it's not within any side yard setback. Yeah,
You remember this, Barton? The idea that you don't overly burden something that's fully conforming already, if it's literally just using the inside of a conforming structure.
So if the addition or a separate freestanding structure is fully compliant, why would that not also be by right?
It is. Well, no, you have to, for a brand new
It
one.
is.
Well, wait. I
Yeah.
think Ed's asking about a brand new.
Yeah,
I
If
thought,
an AD is approved, no.
I thought
it's
we
a new-
said that we needed that any new structure, and this is just, Ed, the idea that who knows how somebody interprets this to build a new one, it at least gets reviewed.
Yeah,
Well, you know, again, the other issue is if somebody has a detached garage and they just want to do it, I think there should be some accountability and some mechanism to give the neighbors and everybody that needs to have some say in it.
so you're saying no by right scenario at all goes through?
I don't think that's really fair because some people
Oh.
have detached garages.
Right, but most detached garages are within the setback, so that would
Right,
put them
and it
in
would have
front.
to come to us.
It's very rare. You'd
Yeah.
have to have a big lot. If
Yeah,
it was
boy,
15
Bart, I
feet
gotta
in.
tell you, what,
Is there some data on how many could do it by right?
No.
But-
That would
but
be,
Bart, imagine this, right? So imagine that there's a property that everything conforms today. And in the future, somebody's gonna occupy or convert part of that without changing it, right? To allow what the purpose of this is. Why would we ask them? There'll be no change to anything that would be visible to anyone else. Why would it
Yeah, but
need,
that's
what would
that's
a planning
conjecture.
board do?
I don't know, but I think, again, that's allowing people to do what they want. And it's taking they could be in a neighborhood, and what if the whole neighborhood's against it?
Well,
What do? You just let them do it?
wait, Bart,
Then you have
against what,
everyone
when you
sue
say
each other.
against it,
and
against
that's
what?
not the criteria. If a neighborhood is against it, that's not the criteria.
Yeah, what do you mean, Bart? Against it, against what?
Okay, they have a garage that's conforming. Everything's
Yep.
conforming. And they
Yep,
say, okay, we want to make it an ADU.
yep.
All right, it depends what you're doing with it. I mean, again, there's no definitions here for elderly, for affordability or anything. If that's all encompassed there, it's one thing, but not unrestricted like this. If you
Well-
have it and somebody decides, well, I'm just going to put an ADU in and rent it out, and they live in a neighborhood and nobody else is in favor of it, I mean, that's not right either, for
Well,
one
it's a-
person to come in and just,
Well, but Bart, if you put a bylaw in, right, then you're allowing it, right? So say it came in front of you, you're sitting there going, a neighbor, even though I have a bylaw that allows it, a neighbor, if it has
well,
no
that's
change,
that's why I'm against it, because I don't think somebody should have the right to do something that the whole neighborhood is against. And the neighbors don't even have a potential say in it.
but
that's-
Bart, we have to have regulations, right? So you say,
That's
Okay.
regulating it.
so what's the okay, so now you're the board. A bunch of neighbors come in and go, I don't want them to rent this, but it conforms. We now have a bylaw intended to allow it. And
Well,
you're
then it's up
saying-
to us to hear it. It's the same thing we hear when people say, well, they're building a structure and I'm going to lose my view of the ocean.
No, that's because they need something from us. This one doesn't. Anyway, never mind. I'll let some other people comment on Bart's concerns here.
Art's 100% right. He's
Hey,
100%
look,
right.
Mr. Full, I'm going to ask again, if you can. This is a meeting among the planning board. We need to get some work done. We're happy to open it up to the public at the end. Please abide by that. Thank you.
So I guess the question is, some communities make it all go through a special permit. And some don't. But I think that might be what Barton's saying, is it
That's
should
right.
all go through.
It
a
is,
special
it's
permit
very
process.
controversial. A lot of communities have disallowed ADUs and they haven't accepted them. They've just, this is a big thing to do this. And if we're going to do it, I think it has to be done right. And I don't think that we have all the ducks in line. There's a lot of missing pieces here. That's my opinion.
I
Well, I
haven't
think that's
been,
why we're
Again,
meeting.
I'm not against it. Don't think I'm the naysayer. And
Steve,
I said it day one, if we do it, I want to make sure it's done properly. I don't think we have all the information here to do this properly, to present something for people to have a full understanding and feel comfortable about it.
I don't think
Steve,
we ever will, though. I don't think it's ever gonna be at a point where we're gonna say, okay, this is gonna be perfect and this is gonna be what it is.
You're right,
I-
Rosanna, it's not gonna be perfect, but
not.
we're not even
We-
close. to
well,
present-
just to clarify,
Not even close. I mean, I think that's not fair because I do think that we are very close and I think we're reasonable. And to everybody's point that they've already made, this can be adjusted, right? So it's not like this has to stay like this forever. It's just, we need a starting point. I think
I want to
everybody would
remind,
agree.
yeah, Rosanna, thanks. I want to remind the board of the discussions that we had related to this item. The goal was to not overly burden people from executing, from taking advantage of this program. And what it does, all we were trying to say is, if there's no questions about it conforming to everything that we're concerned about, let's at least ease that. That's where we came from. If there's difference of opinion or somebody changed their opinion, please share it now. But that's just so you know, that's what we discussed. So please share your thoughts on that. If you change your opinion or you don't recall that, or whatever.
I think the answer brought a comment. I think if the town votes for it as a bylaw, that's what the bylaw says. And it's the applicant has rights as well as the neighborhood. I think the neighborhood doesn't have universal, overview of the individual property. So, it's a balancing act, where it's where the bylaw says there's a review process. So,
Well, to that, Ed, what the issue is here, you can imagine if the bylaw passes, right?
yeah,
What happens here is this adds a step that they have to go through, right, for planning board to review it with no criteria to reject it. Because we can't have a bylaw that's intended to allow units that conforms to everything we put in as the requirements and then force them to go to an application process. Now you've added a burden and a lot of time.
yeah. Well, I would think that there should be a by right for a freestanding building and a by right exterior addition to a building, as well as interior. I don't see why, if it meets all of the area, open space, parking requirements, that's within the current definition of,
Well, because a new one all of a sudden adds character and interpretation. And this is where we thought we needed to just preserve, this is where I can go to where Bart is starting from, where now all of a sudden a neighbor, how do they know accounting for taste? When you say, oh, it fits the character of a neighborhood, it's brand new now. So now it has an image and everything else, and it's interpreting what we're doing, at least at that point, right?
if somebody bought a lot or, bought a house, tore it down, if it was needed repair, and then build a brand new house from scratch, there wouldn't be neighborhood review of it
I
if it
guess
met all
that's
the
true.
bylaw
Yeah, I
requirements.
guess that's true. Yeah. Well, I don't know. I think this was controversial a little bit to get to this point. To get to all the new buildings, I suppose you're saying it's consistent with this
Yes,
as long as it meets all the requirements. But
that's the threshold.
we thought that because it was new, like in terms of, say, use Bart's argument, the neighborhood's concerned. If it's new, at least it is something they've never seen before. And at least we have those conditions that Becky just mentioned to coordinate that it does actually conform to meeting the character of the neighborhood, et cetera, right? It gives one extra layer. I understand that it's a new thing.
Mhm.
I thought we were trying to we're balancing act here, Ed.
Yeah, I don't think people want to build an ugly building. I think we all have the same goals, both the applicant and the town. So, I don't know if it should rise to that level of anxiety about the aesthetics of it. I mean, otherwise we'll be reviewing every single case in town because,
I agree. I'm concerned, but we have two extremes here. We've got Bart concerned that that there's anything as of right, and you're concerned that there's not enough as of right. So
Right.
what do you suggest? What do other people on the board suggest we do about this?
Maybe a hybrid.
It is a hybrid now.
Yeah.
I think inside should be by right. I don't want to get into the business of reviewing everything that's happening that's in conformance with what we lay out. And now we're like, I
Right.
just think it's too much. I think
I
it's a
agree.
little too much.
Agree.
I understand anything new because that's new. It's visible to the neighborhood. It's visible to everybody outside, a new structure. I can appreciate that, but inside, no.
Yeah. And Ed, we could always move to expand it someday if all of a sudden, depending on what kind of reaction we're getting over time.
Well, the argument is that you could always contract it as well. I mean, it can be,
Yeah.
you can change
Right.
it either direction if it goes awry.
Right.
But, either way.
So Bart, are you satisfied that as a hybrid or what you call this halfway, where it allows the indoor stuff to be as of right?
Oh, I'm not concerned about the indoor stuff at
Well,
all.
that's what this is. That's what what anything new has to come in front of the board or
Yep.
whatever board we choose.
No, I just meant to allow somebody to change it, a detached dwelling by right, and they can do whatever they want with it. Now, to finish my thought before we got into controversy, if that's why I asked for the data, if we're talking a minimal amount of properties that would potentially do this, then it doesn't make a difference. If we're talking an overwhelming amount of properties, that's a problem. But
Well,
if
yeah.
it's a minimal amount, it really is negligible and it's a non-issue to me.
I imagine that's
Yeah.
the case, but I don't have any
Yeah.
proof right now.
Yeah,
Right,
that's
and
why.
most-
That's what
Most communities have 3 or 4 that are done a year.
Hmm.
There is not an overwhelming number.
I mean, if it's something, as I say, that we find there's 100 detached units that could potentially do it, and we know that, out of the 100, 75 are absolutely not going to do it. Well, that's a different issue. That's what I was trying to finish and
But
say.
I don't think there's a problem if there's an existing detached accessory and they do something inside with it. Like if it's already there, everybody already knows there's an accessory building there. It's not new.
Yeah,
to
but
the
it's going to be
neighborhood of anybody.
it's going to be people and families living there.
But-
That's
but
the-
it's
that's the
1,000 square
purpose.
feet.
I
That's the
understand
purpose
that's
of
the
the
Like
bylaw.
purpose,
nothing.
but
It's like,
But
it's-
that's not what I'm saying, that it's going to just change the complexion of the neighborhood if that's why I said originally, if there's a street and they have 3 or 4 of these, then it changes the whole complexion of the street.
Well, the purpose of this bylaw is to make a change to affordable
Exactly.
housing.
It's- So
Well-
in other words, we gotta be careful, Bart, just like using, what we're working across purposes sometimes. That's all.
Well, I mean, I'm not in favor of having Marblehead going from 20 to 40,000 people, if you're asking me my opinion, and that's what you're basically saying. You can laugh all you want, but
I'm
that's.
Bart,
saying,
Bart.
things happen. There's progress. Things change.
No,
Things change.
no, it isn't, because
change.
there's a lot more than that.
It's impossible to have that happen. It just is.
Nothing's impossible.
To go
Nothing
from,
is impossible.
to double the population of the town. Come on, Bart. Let's be realistic, all right? Anyway, we were a little bit lower on the page, I think, or the next page, Becky, before we went back to this,
All right, wait a minute. Okay.
right? And
Okay,
I
so
didn't
I'm gonna-
know
I'm
item
gonna work
D.
on what's submitted.
Right.
I'm
Thank
just
you.
doing that. Okay, and we did the standards, so now. Okay,
So-
conditions and requirements.
Right, and does this go to item 6 then? You'll go
That's-
through the numbering.
Yeah, there's
Oh.
5 and then 6. I think we're at
Right.
that was 4, right? Yeah,
Oh,
4.
5, okay, got it, thank you.
Yeah.
The accessory dwelling units must be capable of being discontinued as a separate dwelling unit without demolition of any structural component of the principal dwelling. There shall be no occupancy of the accessory dwelling unit until the building department has issued a certificate of occupancy that the principal dwelling and accessory dwelling unit are in compliance with all applicable health and building codes. The building permit certificate of occupancy shall be revoked upon determination by building inspector that any condition imposed by the town has not been fulfilled. By filing the application for a building permit for an accessory dwelling unit, all owners consent to an inspection upon reasonable notice by the building inspector to ensure compliance with all terms of this section. When a structure which has received a permit for an accessory dwelling unit is sold, the new owners, if they wish to continue to exercise the permit, must within 30 days of the sale submit a notarized letter to the building commissioner stating that they will occupy one of the dwelling units on the premises as their primary residence.
I have a question on this section, and this may or may not be the place to ask it, so forgive me, but my wife likes to watch that show Tiny Houses, and I see a number of these that are built on trailers that you can hook up to a rig and haul around. Article A here, that it doesn't involve any demolition or alteration of the principal dwelling. But is this section here intended to govern that situation I just mentioned? I mean, what's to keep somebody from taking one of these tiny houses on a couple of steel beams with a trailer hitch on it, parking in the driveway and calling it an ADU?
Well, they could, but it needs to get permitted. That's illegal. You can't do that today. So it would need to get permitted. And I don't think we're saying it needs to have a foundation. So I think you could do that.
Yeah,
you would
if it
need-
conformed, I guess, Steve, if they applied for a permit, right, in this case, because it's
Yeah.
not attached or it's not existing, it would have to be seen by a board and
permit.
reviewed. And then I imagine, as long as it conformed to most of the things, it has a good chance of being approved, I suppose.
Yeah, and then the board would probably put some conditions on it saying it can't be, if it's movable, it can't be moved to another a set location on the property kind
Boy,
of thing. But yeah, I don't see why they couldn't do that.
suddenly Marblehead of 40,000 people doesn't seem that far out of reach. And I just wonder how that squares with in compliance with the.
So again,
Let me just finish my comment. I don't
Yeah.
know how a movable structure on a trailer hitch, aligns with the character of the neighborhood. I mean, we all have
No.
friends in the neighborhood.
yeah,
who
so
have,
maybe you wouldn't permit it.
Yeah, we
Maybe it
hadn't,
wouldn't-
well, again, remember, Steve, it has to come in front of us, and that's an interesting question about permanence, or, sort of anchored to the ground. It's an interesting question.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
I've got a friend who has a Class A motor coach that he goes to Florida every year. It's a 40-foot bus that he parks in his driveway, and his neighbors tolerate it because they know that's where he goes during the winter. But
Yeah, you
that's a little
can't do
different.
that in Marblehead right now. That would be illegal. You can park it, but you can't live in it.
Oh, no. What I'm saying is he drives it down to Florida and lives in it down there.
huh,
So as long as there's some provision to govern it, then I'm okay with it. I just want to make sure that
yeah,
there wasn't
right
a loophole.
now,
I want to
but
make
it
sure there
is-
wasn't a loophole that somebody could slide
Yeah.
one of those in.
well, no, it still has to be reviewed, but interesting that you bring up just the notion of whether that has to be addressed somewhere about movable structures becoming more permanent. That's a new one. We hadn't really considered that, Steve. It's an interesting topic.
I'll
Yeah.
ask council about that.
Yeah, because as long as it's reviewed, but you would want to have a condition so that anyone doing that would at least have an expectation of what we would think.
Right, in the
Oh.
bylaw right now, there's a provision that you can only get a 6-month permit for a trailer.
Right, but Steve's got a good point that with the
Yeah.
ADU concept,
Yep,
what is our stance on that? And in terms of character, if something's up on wheels versus anchored to the ground, is there a difference in character
Right.
to that?
yeah, so maybe we address it by saying, because you can't do that now. Even if this was done, you would still have to get a special permit to do it.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. Good, Steve. Thank you. And then under enforcement and termination, I thought was one of our last sections.
Yep, enforcement and determination. Okay,
So it shall be the duty of the building commissioner to administer and enforce the provisions of this bylaw. No building shall be constructed or changed in use or configuration until the building commission has issued a permit. Any new building or structure shall conform to all adopted state and town bylaws, codes, and regulations. No building shall be occupied until a certificate of occupancy has been issued by the building inspector where required. The building commissioner shall issue a cease and desist order on any work in progress or on the use of any premises, either of which are in violation of the provisions of this chapter. The accessory dwelling unit shall terminate immediately upon any violation of any term or condition of this ordinance that the town fails to cure upon 30 days written notice mailed to the applicant and to the occupants of the dwelling address by certified mail return receipt requested. Duty of owner upon termination include the owner shall discontinue the use of the accessory dwelling unit as a separate dwelling unit. The kitchen facilities of the accessory dwelling unit shall be removed, and any additional exterior entrance constructed to provide access to the accessory dwelling unit shall be permanently closed. Are there any questions about that item?
No.
Okay. Severability. All of the clauses of this bylaw are distinct and severable, and if any clause shall be deemed illegal, void, or unenforceable, it shall not affect the validity, legality, or enforceability of any other clause or portion of this bylaw.
Council
That-
item.
And then there's a series of definitions that I don't think are in question right now.
And then I kind of went through the bylaw and looked at other places in the bylaw where changes should be made. So in the parking requirements, adding a new paragraph about, we have 4 paragraphs now that say you need so much parking for these uses, so this should have its own. And
Okay.
then amend accessory uses. Right now, we have a whole section on accessory uses, and we should put something in about accessory dwelling units and reference the bylaw. Article, whatever it is, gonna be 200-50 or 45. And then, let's see, in Article 10D2, those are the permits that the planning board issues. We should add this one.
Okay.
And in the last sentence, so that's just adding that as a list of things. That's where they're listed. And what I'll do is I'll say, and amend Article XD2, which presently reads this, to read instead. And then
Okay.
I'll bold words added, just so people know, because I'm looking at
Sure.
this right now and it's hard to figure that out. And then in enforcement, there's a section 202, and that question is for council. Should I mention this there, or is it just already mentioned enough in the provision itself? And the classification of use, add at the end of the definition of 2-family, something to make clear an ADU is not a 2-family. So I don't know the wording on that. And then I've asked council to look at the bylaw and tell me if there's any place else I missed that we
Okay.
need to add something, to want to capture
Right.
all of those.
Well, thank you for putting this together, Becky. And
You're welcome.
so now that we've been through the overall, board members, do you have thoughts on that you want to go back to? No.
Nope.
Okay.
Okay, so at the
Yep.
meeting, should we present it? So we've already done the PowerPoint a couple times. So should we
Oh.
should we just present this? I'll put this up as a draft or a link to it announcing that we're having the meeting. I know a bunch of people have called and so they know about it, but the so people can see the latest draft so they can not be
Yeah.
seeing it for the first time.
Would you anticipate that at the very least, we're actually reading through it the same way it was just done here with our board?
I guess so. I don't know. I think that's the best way to do it.
I liked Bob's PowerPoint because for the uninitiated, it kind of, visually set the stage for what's trying to be accomplished here.
So begin with that. Steve, you're suggesting then you begin with that and then you come back to the actual terminology?
I think people like pictures, and I think it got the points across really well, and then you get to dive into the details.
The only thing I want to be careful of, and maybe it'll take a certain amount of effort, is to coordinate that PowerPoint with what this ended up.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I don't want something to conflict with this. So Becky, maybe we'd have to work together on going back to the PowerPoint and making sure it coordinates with what this ended up.
Well, Bob, I know you have a full-time job outside of this, so if that's not feasible, then I'd say forego the PowerPoint. But I just thought it was really good.
Well, maybe Steve, actually, there could be some slides that are less impactful, right? That aren't literal, right? That just gives some background. So
So
let
this
me
was
think
our
about
last
it.
one. This was our
Yeah,
last one. It
let's
sort of had
see.
the
Okay.
agenda,
Yep,
introduction,
yep.
and then it said what it is.
Yeah, these are good.
And then this
Yep.
is the one we did before. And then,
Yeah, maybe this will work.
kind of why we were looking at them. Yeah, I guess we should do that.
I
I
think,
think so.
I think it's very helpful.
Yeah,
What
and
it
then the
is,
benefits and
yeah.
then work to date. And then
Yeah,
maybe
we'll
this is where
update
we get
this, right.
into instead and not so
Yeah.
much the resources and how many, well, we should say how many we can
Yeah.
expect. And yeah, so the draft. So maybe we
and
get
then-
into the
right.
specifics here.
Yeah, then we don't need the draft,
Yeah.
really, right? Because we can go into what we're proposing.
Yeah.
So good. There's a lot of good stuff here.
Okay,
Thank you,
so-
Steve. That's a good,
Yeah, so I'll dust this off and I'll send it to you, Bob,
That's
like we
great.
did last time. And-
yeah, thanks for the suggestion. Good one.
I have one last question after
Yeah.
going through it. So if I'm hearing you correctly, you want to put through this document here. Is that correct?
The one we just went through
Yes,
before this part. Yeah.
yes, correct.
Yes.
So there's no language about reduced rate for affordability. There's nothing relating to elderly. This is unrestricted. That you can just build an ADU, period.
Mhm.
Okay.
A question, Bob, also, just to go back to section
Well,
4.
wait, can I go back to Bart's, he had a question there, a two-part. Sorry, Bart. So the second part, at least for me, and I don't know about the rest of us, felt that the the unrestricted part was important to me and maybe others. The first part that you asked about the affordability, that actually, I want people to remind me, when we had a figure in there, like either 70 or 60% of market rate.
It was
What
70%
happened?
market rate.
Yeah,
Yeah.
what happened to that?
So remember we
That's what I'm
talked,
asking.
yeah, we talked about it and decided that that was so restrictive, no one would use it. And
Hmm.
this way, people would
Hmm.
use it and you get the naturally, just like the housing production plan said, the naturally occurring affordable housing as opposed to having a restriction. And this board talked about how people weren't going to invest that sort of money to make these changes, then only to
Yeah,
have to
Right.
have a restriction on it and more would be built and they are affordable in that they're
Mhm.
smaller and naturally
Becky, on that topic, does, the resources that were listed, the reports that were done by Pioneer or whoever,
yeah.
were there any statements on that issue of, like in terms of feedback from other communities that have tried it, or in terms of the affordability by putting a limit? Did they get into that at all? Can't recall.
So not many communities did that. Salem has done that. And yeah, I
And-
think the comment is we're not Salem.
But we don't have
And-
any like facts or data on what that did to applications or anything, right? It's such a different kind of community than Marblehead. It's hard to make comparisons.
Yeah, most communities didn't do that.
But
Um,
let me also, Bart brought something up earlier that I'd like to just go back to for a moment. And it was the question about under the purpose, should we didn't include an item about your statement, Becky, about an interest in creating naturally affording, or what do you call it, naturally occurring affordable housing.
Affordable
Yeah.
housing.
That came right
Shouldn't-
from the production plan.
Yeah, should that be, I mean, I thought we all agreed with that. Should that be one of the purpose items?
Well, that's what I've been saying the whole time.
Yeah,
Because
Wait,
the big
let's make sure it
sticklers for
doesn't
me
say that.
are, this doesn't reference an elderly parent, a child coming home from college, or affordability.
well, what we
Again,
can do, Bart,
I'm gonna stick to my guns with this. If you
Bart,
leave
what
the,
I think we can include that, it's in the slide, so if we do the PowerPoint first,
Well, let's look at the purpose.
yeah,
Increase number of small dwelling rental units available in the town, increase the range of choice of housing accommodations, increase the supply of housing and diversity of housing options in response to demographic changes, smaller household and older households.
Right.
encourage the efficient use of town housing supply, and then maximizing privacy, dignity, and independent living among family members, preserving domestic family bonds. I mean,
Right.
Becky,
so-
how about under C, increase the supply of naturally occurring affordable housing?
Yeah.
Again, what I said is if you don't have, and I understand it would limit somebody building it, but if you allow somebody to put an accessory dwelling use without any restriction, they're gonna rent it for market value. There's gonna be no.
No, you can't. You can't
No.
rent it for market value. I mean, you can rent it for market
Yeah.
value, yes, but you
But-
can't do a short-term rental. You
Yeah,
can.
but
you
I know that. This has nothing to do with short-term rentals. I understand that.
Yeah, Bart,
Yeah,
maybe
yeah.
we can ask the rest. We've been, just to remind everybody, I'd like to bring everybody up on the context. Bart, you brought this up before, be fair, this is not the first time. And I believe we've debated it a number of times and we agreed to disagree, right? I think no one's surprised by your statement, but no
He's-
one that I know on the board wants to limit it to elderly people and caregivers. We
That's,
can't
no, I
enforce
didn't
it.
say that. There's no mechanism for affordable housing here.
I think the mechanism is these are people that are going to be living in your home.
Right,
Difference between an
Right.
investment property.
right,
Well-
Family members that aren't paying market rent.
right.
No, I'm not talking about the family members. That's, you're totally missing the point. The spirit of what this was supposed to be was for elderly parents, caregivers, children coming back, and to create affordable housing. This does not create
Okay.
affordable housing.
Art,
It's
okay,
it's
can you
not
do me,
relative.
can you do me a favor, Bart, or do us all a favor here? Can you state as clearly as possible a statement of something to add to this that addresses like a proposed language that somehow, so we can understand the kind of proposition you're talking about?
To create affordable housing at a reduced rate of 70%. That's what the spirit of everybody's been talking about. I think you missed this.
But-
That's what Kurt
Yeah.
James and that
Oh,
whole.
no, I hear
No.
what their interest is. We debated amongst ourselves whether it fought against purposes to put that in. Would it actually limit people from doing it? But look, I'm open on this one, on whether, if that's your issue, is whether to put a limit on the amount of income you can receive. I'm open to us discussing that again.
I mean, my real belief is if we don't restrict it, people are going to do this and have it at market value. It's not going to create what it's intended to do.
Bart,
Nobody
how many
believes
people? I mean, how many people? So 80% is probably gonna land in the, family, which they're not gonna rob their family, right? I mean,
We're not talking about a family,
Right,
Roseanne.
what I'm
are.
saying is.
No,
but-
we're not. No, we're
but we're
not.
not
This has
saying
nothing to do with a family
80%.
member. This is,
80%.
no, you're missing the point. This wasn't intended.
No,
for
I got the
family
point.
members.
I just don't think it's going to be 80% of the time. I don't think it's going to be the majority of the we're not going to be able to control every single arrangement. Like,
So
that's crazy.
by unrestricting it and say to everybody, you can build an ADU and charge whatever you want. You're not going to get people that can't afford to live here that want to live here coming here because those houses, it's going to be the same thing as now. There's not going to be any affordable apartments. You've missed the point. It's not, I'm not talking about a family member. This has nothing to do with a family member. The spirit of the production committee was for affordable housing for
Yeah.
people that cannot afford it. This will negate that if we don't restrict it. Nobody will be able to come in and afford it. It's going to be the same thing as now, except open up a lot more units for people that can afford to come in. That's all it's going to do.
But if it's not economical to build it and get a return, it's not gonna happen. It's gonna.
But some people will build it to have affordability come in. We've been through this. And if there's 5 built, then that's 5 affordable that'll come in and it's working. If we do it this way, nobody is going to come in for affordable housing.
Well, Bart, it's an interesting
Possible.
topic. It's probably the most, I can understand it. It's definitely the most debatable, thing so far because and I don't argue with your idea about the intent, and there are a number of people who would like to see it with a limit. The only thing was some of our colleagues on the board were thinking that they feared that it would prohibit the actual building of them. and assume, just say a fair portion or maybe the majority would be for purposes who would want in-laws or, kids who are just starting a family or caregivers, elderly move into it, whatever, all that. Say that's a good portion of it. That'll naturally, obviously, nobody's going to rob each other. Your fear being that
Right.
that if you don't restrict it, it'll become just part of the market of a high-end Marblehead town, and you just
Right.
happen to get couples who are wealthy living in these tiny houses.
So this is,
I-
this is
yeah.
two different issues, what I'm talking about. If if a caregiver and an elderly parent are coming in, that's not included in the 70%. That's a whole different issue. They're going to give them a permit because they're going to say, this is my parent. You can prove it's their parent. You can prove it's their child. That's going to be, I don't think there's any issue to that whatsoever. The real issue is to leave it unrestricted for everybody else.
Hmm.
So we're
How do you-
talking about two different things.
But
Yeah.
how do you stipulate and how do you regulate that short of creating something like Section 8 around these units? How do you do that?
Well, it's not
In an-
Section 8,
So-
it's 70% affordability. The spirit of this whole thing was, initially, we talked about aging in place, elderly parent, elderly person that needs to rent out a property.
Mhm.
And then it became affordable housing. And the whole thing is for affordability. That was the spirit of ADUs everywhere, is affordability.
Well, diversity too.
Okay,
but,
affordability, diversity, same thing, hand in hand, two words.
Hmm.
If we don't restrict it, that's not going to happen. And we're going to have an
Mhm.
influx of
It's a
people.
fair,
thinking
yeah, it's a
about-
fair comment.
I mean, again, I could build in my garage so I could get another $2,000 a month. That will pay for my mortgage. And I could easily do it and rent my garage out as an apartment.
Oh, Bart, I do remember one item. All right, remember, here's a counter argument that you should recall. We were saying that in the case that there's an elderly person that wants to hold on to their home and costs have gotten so out of control that they could use the assistance of, they have spare room and they want to get some income to be able to stay in it. For
Right.
them to be able to make the investment in having that extra unit and then get enough to recoup enough to keep them in the house. That was one of the other reasons we didn't restrict.
Right, I
Well,
remember
maybe
that.
we don't restrict the elderly person. We can do it any way we want.
Well,
All
yeah,
I'm saying is if we leave this open-ended, we're not going to change anything. All we're going to do is let the rich get richer. That's all that's going to happen. I mean, and shame on everybody if you don't think that if we don't restrict it, you're just going to have people that can afford it. Young people that can afford to come to Marblehead are going to rent the properties, and they're going to scoop them up. There's going to be no diversity, no affordability. Those are going to be out the window because it's going to be supply and demand. That's all I'm saying. I'm 100% in favor of elderly, whatever we could do for the elderly, 100%. No questions asked.
But I'm
And
not-
relatives.
I'm not sure how you make exceptions for, like, are you saying like it'd be 70% of market rate except for
Yeah,
elderly?
we can do that, over 65, over 70.
Hmm.
If we're doing it, we might as well do it right. That's what I said from day one. And I don't think this is the way to do it because I think it's really opening up Pandora's box.
Oh.
And I think there's going to be a lot of people who are going to say, wait a minute, what about this? You're going to have, just like the people have bought condos and created the shortage because they're using free Airbnbs. It's
Well,
created.
again, let's try to be careful in not getting into the short-term issue, but Andrew, why don't we go through each person and ask for comments? If I could get your personal thoughts on this.
I actually like what you just came up with about unrestricted for elderly and then adding in that 70%. I actually like that.
Interesting. How about you, Ed?
Well, I think, there are multiple factors involved here and they're sort of contradictory. We're trying to incorporate as much as we can. I think, to counter what Barton was saying, the mission is to provide naturally occurring, an increase in the supply of naturally occurring housing, which is needed statewide, which is needed townwide for diversity. So we have a multiple array of functions that we're trying to solve at the same time. I just think that if somebody has to limit the income, the rent to a certain number, if it's not economically feasible, it's just not going to happen. It's not going to be built because no one would want to build something and lose money on it. It's counterintuitive and counterproductive as well. So I would leave it open and let the market take its course. And again, we can always change it. If it gets out of hand, we can change, we can restrict it. But if we micromanage it to death, it's going to sit on the books like things have been done in the past. And nothing will happen, but it will make us feel good that we did something, but it'll be very minimal.
How about you, Rosanna?
Yeah, so I'm in Ed, I agree with Ed's points. I think there is a very real investment factor here that we need to be realistic about, that if people are going to invest, I mean, there needs to be, people aren't just going to just do it to lose money on it. I also think that, I don't know, so I was thinking, how many units is this going to yield? 5, 6, 7? I mean, it seems as though there may be an occasion where there may be a higher rent but I don't know that that's going to be the norm. I don't know that that's going to be the majority. And so I just don't know that it's worth micromanaging it to the point for that small percentage that may be out there. This isn't Section 8. This isn't meant to be a whole big affordable housing, this is exactly what the rent's going to be. And I mean, that's not, I think that's going too far with the intent of this. So that's where I'm just trying to find a balance to not say that this is Section 8, and so it has to be this affordable.
Yeah.
And at the same time, practically speaking, I don't know if most of the dwellings are going to end up in a high market, rent situation. So I guess I would be in Ed's, I agree with his original position.
How about you, Steve?
Yeah, I appreciate everyone's comments, and it's a good conversation that we should be having. I think the term naturally occurring satisfies what the original intent was for family members, caregivers, etc. I don't know how you accomplish, and this is probably a topic for town attorney, a list of who qualifies. If you start with the elderly for some sort of exemption, where do you draw the line, and does that run smack into anti-discrimination for housing? I mean,
Yeah.
why not people with disabilities? Why not?
Right. Yeah, that's a good point.
So I
That
think,
makes me real nervous.
yeah, I think we'd be open
Yeah.
up the town. I think you said it best, Rosanna and Ed and Barton. I know you're championing something that's worth championing, but you have to look at it for what it is and in scope of how many units we're really talking about here. And it's not a panacea. It's not going to solve, the affordable housing issue. But if affordable housing is as much for somebody who doesn't have the income to stay in their house, isn't that affordable for them? And isn't that the intent of this to achieve that? I think if we try to broaden it too broadly to encompass and attack the affordable housing issue in this town, we're going to end up failing because it's not going to satisfy everybody. And I think it needs to be laser focused on what it's intended to achieve.
Thanks, Steve.
Bear in mind one thing, 70% is still a big chunk of change in Marblehead. So it's not like low income. So let's be cognizant of that too.
I do, but thank you for bringing it back up, Bart. And I think what, reminds me now, we batted this around a fair amount. I think, right now, I hate to make a vote or something, but in terms of what to present to the public next week, but I suppose I'm sensing there's a majority right now of feeling. I hate to leave somebody out. There's not really, I can't think of a compromise. I want to avoid the special case for elderly is way too difficult because of what Steve said, limiting it, and also just the elderly, and who knows, it's like an elderly wealthy person who really didn't need it, but they happen to be older than 65. So I'm afraid that it has to be all or none. Now, remember, this can be a living thing where over time we can monitor the kind of effect we're getting. So, for example, if you get 4 permit applications in a year, is that a trend? The next year, maybe you get another 4. Do you see what's happening? And we have a chance to react and go to the town with adjustments to it over time on any of these items. I just sense that because I'm kind of in the court of where Ed and Rosanna and Steve are right now on this. So whether is that enough to say we keep it as is? I know that you won't be satisfied, Bart, but it's totally it's an interesting and worthwhile discussion. But I think that's where it seems to be heading right now.
Can I go back and add a comment?
Yes.
One of the items on item 4, procedure, on the very last item D, we talked about doing the floor plan, but also adding a site plan and building elevations. We talk about site plan, that's very specific. Do we want it to really make it official? Shouldn't it be a surveyed plan or a certified
Yeah,
site
yeah.
plan?
I'll
Yeah,
do it that way, a plot plan.
yeah,
And I
certified
can,
plot plan.
yeah, I can grab the language that we use for the other special permits.
Right. Yeah, good point, Ed. So, maybe if we're getting close to wrapping this up, knowing that we have a public meeting next week, we can, if there's time, I don't know what we had for closing time, but at least get some preliminary feedback from public who have waded through our meeting. Are people up for closing this portion and moving to open it up a bit?
So moved.
Anyone else? Okay,
Second.
good. Thank you. All right. So I don't know if it's whether, Becky, whether you're monitoring raised hands or if
Oh,
we
let
just,
me
I
look.
know that Mr. Full has been waiting and probably has further comments. We can begin with him, and then if you can monitor others. And again, to everyone, please restate your name and address, please, for the record.
Yes, so James Full has his hand up.
Okay.
Yeah, Jimmy Full, Cheever Avenue, Marblehead. So I know I come off as a rather brash and crass or whatever, and my comments aren't probably on cue all the time. I'm looking at it from, again, my perspective, what I've dealt with. And I know this is a working meeting, and I know there's a public meeting next week. But I also talk to a lot of people in town that don't attend these meetings because it's not come to town meeting yet or whatever. I want to put this out here. It's no different than the school committee meeting or anything else. I just sat through this tonight. I see 3 agendas and I see Barton Height with his input into the agenda. And I literally just watched you all tell him, basically his opinion doesn't count, put it into words, whatever else. That said, this whole ADU thing started as an affordable means for the elderly to stay in their homes, transition the home to their children, whatever the case may be. I personally feel, some of you have all said this as well, that it's gone to a different level now. I think sight has been lost on the initial intent of the ADU. And I just want to finish by saying, before this comes to town meeting, there's a lot of bullet holes in the working document that really need to be addressed because there are unanswered questions. And whether people are in attendance tonight on this meeting or next week, people in town talk. And there's a lot of concern about the ADU and how people are going to rent and how the rent is going to be controlled. And honestly, at this point, I have 2 neighbors that are Airbnb renters. I haven't seen them in over a year and a half. So what is the accessory dwelling unit going to do at market value? Is it just going to be another revenue source for the property owner? And again, by right to me means after all the time I've spent with Conscom and everything else to get my permit to put up a 20 by 20 garage, why shouldn't I just wait another year until this passes and then I can do it on a 0 lot line by right on my property, or however you guys determine this? I really truly just want to stress the fact before this goes to town meeting that you need to have your ducks in a row, and all those questions and asterisks and bullet holes in that working document need to be addressed. And hopefully some of them will be addressed before next week's public hearing on this, because
So-
there's been 0 public input into this except for some of the surveys that you've done.
So Mr. Full, can I address a couple of those things first before I open it
Please
up
do.
to my colleagues? A few things. So first of all, I appreciate that you're concerned about, our performance here in relation to like comments like Bart. We don't always agree, right? We're a board. And there's a member, now, this isn't the first time that's been discussed. There have been probably, I'd say around 10 meetings that have occurred among the board. You haven't been there. And, you know, maybe, so just to understand our process, not every item is something that everyone can agree on and just how it ends up. So we just tested the spirit of the group and understand we have to move forward with something. And it's not that it's that way forever, but it is the way we were proposing it. Second thing is related to when you talk about what you're going through. We don't know anything about the circumstances that you're in, but the way that this board operates is that we enforce bylaws. This proposal, we were very clear tonight, and I hope you saw it, that anything that doesn't conform to the bylaws needs a special permit, which is a very rigorous process. And so this idea of saying that an ADU can be built on a zero lot line, it cannot be built on a zero. So I don't know why, is that something that we were not clear about?
Well, so you mentioned the fact that I haven't been on these meetings, but these meetings are public information, so I don't have to attend. I can pull them up on the internet and I can
That's right.
review the
Yep,
minutes,
yep.
everything else. So please
Mhm.
don't underestimate the fact that I do pay attention. What I'm trying to tell you, Mr. Schaffner, is that people in town that don't take the time to watch these meetings, that don't take the due diligence to read the minutes of the meetings, their concerns are it's an ADU, it's by right, which in their minds means zero lot line. I can do whatever the hell I want with, pardon my language, I can do whatever the heck I want with my property. And when it comes to town meeting, that's going to be the unclear point that, again, your working document has so many bullet holes in it and so many unanswered questions. And we sat here tonight and I listened to, well, we can add this, we can take this away, we can do this, that, and the other thing. I know it's a working document. I'm just saying, before you get to town meeting, before it goes too much further in the process, you really need to delineate, is it for elderly? What is the percentage? Is it 70% market value? Is it 60%? Whatever. There's a lot of things to consider. And if you're going to do it, it needs to be done right, because we all know once you put a tax on somebody, it never goes away. So if you open the door saying, oh, well, we can come back next year and change it, unfortunately, that's just not how it works, in my opinion. And I thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you. Any board members have any comments?
Jim, what other bullet holes do you see?
Well, you know, a lot, and thank you, Andrew. So the character of the neighborhood changing, you know, who's going to regulate that? Because I took some notes, and a lot of that document squarely places enforcement on the building commissioner. We have a building commissioner / building department that is overwhelmed. Adding all this next year, if this passes, adding all that enforcement to the building commissioner, unfortunately, I personally don't think the building commissioner can handle his responsibilities as it is. We have unfilled seats on the building, inspectors, everything else. So that's one piece that needs to be addressed in my mind. You know, you talk about the neighborhood concerns, changing the character of the neighborhood, or better yet, I think it was Steve that brought it up. Hey, I got a 40-foot RV. I can park it in my yard. I know a few people in town that have RVs. Well, okay, that's different than an ADU. But if I buy a FEMA house on wheels and throw it in my yard and hook it up to the plumbing and water and electric, that becomes a rental property. We have to be able to delineate or define that, to say it has to be a concrete brick and mortar structure, you know, and eliminate any loopholes to allow things like that from happening.
Thank you.
You know, one thing for the group, the issue of limiting the income, limiting the rent. Is that something we explicitly bring up next week with the public to get some feedback? Or are you open to that? Or are you pretty anchored into how you feel, each person?
When we
I
had the
think-
forum, that was a big deal for the people that came to the forum, the
Yeah.
affordability. I
Yeah.
mean, again, I'll state for the record, what this started out as is completely different than what it's wound up now. This is not the same thing that we started out at.
I want to be a little careful of the hyperbole though, okay? Let's be a little careful, please, Barton, because to say completely different things like that,
It is completely different. And you know what? I will say what I feel like saying.
But-
I'm an elected
but it-
member of this board too.
I
am not
understand,
gonna
but
be told what to say.
no, but Bart.
Okay, just remember that.
My point
And I
is,
know I'm saying it publicly. It is true. It is true, Bob, and get off your high horse. It is
well,
true. This is not what it started out with. This started
Wow.
out to be diversity and affordability and housing for the elderly. Now it's become unrestricted rentals for everybody. This is wrong. It's shameful that you would even propose this. It's shameful to the town of Marblehead and the residents that you would open up Pandora's box like this and say anybody can rent a property unrestricted. Shame on you.
So I
We're here to
think.
represent the town.
wow.
I think we need to take a step back. I think
Wow.
we need to take it back to being respectful across the board. All right. Nobody's trying to dismiss anybody. Nobody's trying to offend anybody. We're here. That we are all entitled to have our own opinions. Bart, you're entitled. Bob's entitled. We're all entitled to have our opinion, and we can agree or disagree among each other. Let's stay respectful, okay? Because there is no value in going down this road of attack, personal attacks, everything else. It doesn't accomplish anything, right? We're here to do a job. I think one of the things we do have to keep in mind is that this isn't supposed to be the panacea to solve all affordability problems in Marblehead. That is not what this is. That's not what it ever was, right? So we're trying to find the balance. There's a lot of competing interests. Bob, to your question, when you mentioned, should we open this up to the public? I'm always open to hearing public opinion, right? I just think we need to ground that this was not supposed to solve everything. That's not what this is. So, but I'm open to public opinion, of course, too.
Meaning, and we might get comments anyway, we're likely to. I just meant, should we, it seems to be the nubbiest issue of everything we've discussed, is this one item of the limitation of a rental income.
I think if it's something that's out there that people are going to be bothered by, I think we ask. I
Yeah.
think we proactively say, look,
Yeah.
this is an item that we've been debating.
Yeah.
We need to know, we need to hear.
Yeah.
I think
That's my opinion.
unlike the zoning board of appeals, which does not have a constant policy, the planning board can have a policy, and we can vote to have a decision on a certain conclusion. However, that doesn't mean it's enacted. Nothing gets enacted until it goes before town meeting. So it's the people of Marblehead at town meeting that are going to make this say yay or nay. And our task is simply just to propose amendments, and present it to the town meeting and let the town take it from there. So, I think.
Well, yeah.
This is not the zoning board of appeals where we have to be swayed by immediate.
No,
public
yeah, I
reaction.
understand,
We can have a
but what-
policy. We
what
can have
we've
a
been
policy
dealing-
in planning.
Thanks, Ed. What we've been dealing with here, and this is where I'm a little bit, disappointed that seems to be missing. I don't know. Anyway, I'm not going to get into it. But the
The
issue is it's very subtle. We've been trying to thread a needle here. There are a number of agendas. This is not a simple topic. We've worked hard for half a year to try to consider something that takes the interest of the town as best we can, that we think can pass, right? That's the other thing to keep in mind. It has to be, defensible on many levels. And we worked hard to get to this point. And that's anyway.
I think Rosanna's spot on, and I think if we
Yeah.
put up the purposes at the very beginning, I think we've been consistent throughout. If those purposes reflect what the intention is, I don't know how anybody could dispute.
Thank you.
Are there other public comments?
Other public comments?
I don't see any hands raised. Nope.
Okay,
All right, so Bob,
with
I'll
that-
send you the PowerPoint
thank you.
and I will get some information and I'll let you know if council makes any changes and redistribute the draft and put it up on the website so people can see it prior to.
All right. And with that, I'll look for motions to close the public hearing, close this
Oh,
meeting,
no hearing, yeah, just closing
close
it.
this meeting.
So moved.
Second,
Okay, all in favor? Andrew,
In favor.
Rosanna,
In favor.
Bart,
Favor.
Ed,
in favor.
Steve?
In favor.
Okay, thank you, everybody.
Thanks.
See you next week.